Hello and welcome to Azure Terraformer. I'm your host, the Azure Terraformer himself. Today is the 9th episode, and it's a mashup episode between a tool called Packer and, wait for it, yes, Terraform. So we'll be doing some Terraform and we'll be doing some Packer just to show how these tools work extremely well together. Of course, you may be familiar with Packer. It's a virtual machine image building tool. It can do cross-platform builds of virtual images on cloud platforms and also hyperscalers. Not hyperscalers, but hypervisors on premise. So it's a very useful tool when working with virtual machines. So today we're going to build some Packer images for Linux and Windows. We're going to set up an Azure Packer image repository, which is really nothing more than a resource group that we can drop managed images into. Then we're going to provision our virtual machines using the Packer images just to test. So that's what we got on the roadmap today. It's going to be an action-packed day. Looking forward to knocking this one out. So if you'll join me, let's get off to the races. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to stub out my folder for my source code. In this episode, I'm going to have Packer code and I'm going to have Terraform code. So I'm just going to create two separate folders for those two environments. I am going to start off by creating a Packer repository for our Packer images to go into. So on Azure, let's just call this Packer repo, and let's create, let me check, git status, what branch am I on? Am I not even in a folder? I'm probably in the wrong folder. My bad. Okay. Git status. Let me check what branch I'm on. Okay, I'm on the wrong branch. Check out B. Feature EP9. Live. Okay. Cool. So now we have that set up. So I'm going to set up a Terraform project. Main.tf. I'm just going to go snag my standard configuration just to get things off to the races. And really all I need is a resource group. And so I'm going to drop in my resource group. Now this resource group, I'm not going to name it with random things. I'm just going to call it EP9 and we're going to call it Packer. And that should be good to go. And I do not need the random provider this time. So I'm going to drop that, and I think this looks pretty good. So let me drop into the Terraform directory. Let me run Terraform init. And we're going to run Terraform apply auto approve, and we're going to try and get this resource group out there. Really not a lot to it. It's just a simple resource group that we're going to drop our Packer images into. So now that we've got this Packer resource group set up, it's still thinking, but it's in the works. Bear with it. We got to wait for that apply to happen. Anyways, so while we're waiting on that, I'm going to stub out my first Packer image. We're going to create a Linux image and we're going to create a Windows image. So I'm going to stub this out, Windows, and you can watch the Terraform apply as it happens. Now, Packer does allow you to use both JSON formats, which was the original, the only way, and then the newer method is to use HCL or HashiCorp language, which is basically the language that Terraform uses itself. So we are going to use the HCL version. So I'm going to start by stubbing out variables .packer.hcl, and then my files. So this is kind of the standard, template that I use. I'm going to try and stop saying the standard template that I use when I set up a Packer template. So just like Terraform, there's some conventions that I follow to help me keep myself organized, just so that most projects I know where to look. My team knows where to look, where I put things, right? And that's just what I want to do. So I'm going to declare some variables. Subscription ID, type equals string, we're going to have a tenant ID, we're going to have a client ID, we're going to have a client secret. So the authentication, you might be noticing, works a little bit differently with Packer. We have to actually pipe in the builder configuration for Terraform using variables. And so that's what these four are for. They're the usual suspects when you're using a service principal to authenticate with Azure, with the Azure ARM API. And I'm so I've gotten my variables, but they're in the wrong file. How did that happen? Okay. Now let's go to my plugins. So just like Terraform, Packer has a Packer block which you can specify required plugins. I'm not really going to be using any, so we're just going to put that as a placeholder because that's kind of the standard requirement. This is something I use for my Linux builds. It's just a standard execution command that I use when I'm whenever I'm executing a script on the Linux host. So that's what we're doing. So now I'm gonna skip and I'm gonna set up my Azure builder, and then I'll go down into my actual build where I'm running the provisioners on the builder. So the terminology changed a little bit, going from JSON to HCL, but these are the former builders, and the provisioners go inside of your build block, and then you can target different sources. So this, I'm going to use the Azure ARM source, and I'm just going to give it a name, and I'm going to set the client ID. It's going to be var.client ID, client secret. We're going to say subscription ID equals var.sub. We're going to say tenant ID equals var tenant ID. And then I'm just going to get these things to kind of line up a little bit. Okay. Yes. Can't have any badness there. So this is a magic string that is going to point Packer to start using the Azure Resource Manager builder. And so this uses ARM to build a virtual machine image. And you can see in the documentation many of the properties that you can use to configure this. There's lots of different bells and whistles. But here in this episode, we're just going to go through some of the basics. So the first one that should not be a surprise is I'm going to need a location. And I'm just going to call this West US. The next one is going to be the managed image name. This is going to be the name of the actual managed image that's going to pop out when this image gets created. Now, I would recommend for you when you're actually building versions, and we'll probably go through this in a future episode, is you'll probably want to embed version numbers in this managed image, or use a shared image library on Azure to help better manage the versions of your image. Because what's going to happen is you're going to run Packer once, you're going to make some updates, you're going to run it again, and you're going to want to be able to make updates to your Packer image, and you may want to test those versions as you roll out those updates before you go start using them in your Terraform deployments. So it's a really good idea to institute kind of a versioning pattern. There. Communicator, can I spell? We'll find out. Linux uses an SSH communicator. We're going to use a Linux type server. Now, Azure virtual machines, if you've ever used those, have a few properties that if you're going to use a marketplace image, you need these properties in order to triangulate the marketplace image. And so that consists of the image offer, the publisher, and the SKU. And then lastly, we're going to need an image size. And luckily, I have all those. Handy. I know exactly what I want to use. I want to use Ubuntu server. I want to use Canonical, and I want to use 1804 LTS. And the VM size, I want it to be just DS2v2. Ooh, what's that? Okay, so that should be good. We should be happy with this. Let me just push this out. We're going to line these up a little bit. Now, one thing I am going to do preemptively is I'm going to add a property because I'm not connected to a private network. I haven't set up a VPN or anything like that. I'm going to use a property called allowed inbound IP addresses. Now, this is some magic that's going to have Packer, when it creates all of the virtual infrastructure that's going to be used to run my provisioners, it's going to set up an NSG. And in that NSG, it's going to poke a hole for my home IP address so that my machine that I'm going to run this Packer build on is going to be able to talk to this virtual machine and run the provisioners. Okay, so that's what we got. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to define my build. Again, the nomenclature changed a little bit when we went from JSON to HCL. We've got sources now. I'm going to name my source. It goes source.type, source type, and then the name of the source. And so you can see the Azure RM, and you can see I named it VM. It's kind of a bad name, but when you do multi-targeting, or if you have different types that you want to build, maybe it might be useful to give it a more specific name. So then in here, I'm going to just use a provisioner. Now there's different types of provisioners. I'm using Shell, which is commonly used for Linux, and I'm going to use my local execute command just to give this shell some context on the identity that I want it to run within. And then I'm going to give it an inline script, and I'm just going to run apt update. That's it. Now I don't have to do sudo and all that jazz, because in my local.execute command, I'm already setting the context where, hey, run this as sudo, so you can do privileged things like install software and run updates and things like that. So that's kind of an important thing when you're setting up a computer. You're going to be installing stuff, and you're going to want it to you're going to want it to work, right? It's going to have admin privileges in order to work, so you kind of have to do that. So the last thing I did, this is kind of an Azure thing, Windows Azure. I don't know if you remember that back in the day. WA agent. This is a command that just kind of cleanly shuts down the Linux machine. Think of this as like the Linux version of sysprep on Azure. And this is an Azure only thing. If we're gonna multi-target this on EC2, don't need to do this, right? There may be other things I need to do in EC2 to kind of clean up, but this is an Azure specific thing. So I'm just going to call this out to only run when I'm provisioning on this particular source. So source type. Okay. So that's it. So now I could run Packer build, but I need to pipe in my authentication. So to make this easy, what I usually do is I add like a debug.sh file, And in this debug.sh file, I'm going to drop some environment variables that define input parameters to my Packer template. So I've already defined variables for client ID, client secret, subscription ID, tenant ID. These environment variables with this capital PKR underscore capital VAR underscore prefix are going to be automatically picked up by the Packer command line interface and pipe in whatever these values are to the corresponding variables that I've defined in my Packer template. Now, in order to do this, I need a service principal. So I'm going to hop over here, go into my Azure Active Directory. I'm going to create a new app. I'm going to call this Packer episode 9, and we are going to create an application. We're going to snag the application ID. I'm doing this, just to kind of show you guys the process for how this is done, where you get all the values, so that when you do this yourself, you can come back and you can see definitively what's happening here. Before I go get my subscription ID, I'm just going to create a client secret, and we'll just call this Packer CLI, and we'll snag the secret value. Don't worry, I will delete this after this episode, so I'm not hiding any of the values from you. But just trust me, if you try and mess with me, it's not going to work. It's not going to work, man. So let me go to my subscription. I'm going to grab my subscription ID, and I'm going to drop my subscription ID in here. Okay, so now, where am I? I need to go up a couple of folders, and I need to go into my Linux. Okay, beautiful. So now that is a hidden file, so it's not going to show up unless I do that. But I need to execute this file, so I need to go sudo change mod plus x, which gives me execution privileges, debug.sh. This is my sudo password. Now when I run debug.sh, it's, maybe I need to do that. There we go. Ooh, what happened? What happened here? Did I type Azure? Did I do a typo? Azure ARM. I'm pretty sure the A and the ARM would be redundant. My bad. Creature habit. Actually, no, that should be the case, right? Oh yeah. So it is redundant. It is Captain Redundant. I just forgot the A. I'm pretty sure. Let's go check that value real quick, just to be double sure. Yeah, it is Azure ARM. So it's Azure Resource Manager. Okay. So there you have it. Okay. So I got that fixed. Let's run this again. See if this is working. And looks good. So it does not oh, you know what I forgot? So this is not a super helpful error, but I know why this is happening. It cannot find the resource group, blah, blah, blah. And, I set up my service principal, but I did not give my service principal access to my subscription. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add a role assignment, and I'm going to make it a contributor because Packer needs to do a lot of things. And I'm going to do episode 9, Packer. Yeah, there we go. Review and assign. I think we're good. We're solid. We're solid. Now let's rerun this again, and it should work this time. Yada, no problem. So now what Packer is doing, and this is the magic of Packer, whatever builder you're using, it is going to go and talk to that builder's APIs. So on Azure, it's going to go create a resource group. It's going to create a VNet. It's going to create subnets. It's going to create a key vault. It's going to go create all the things so that it can launch a virtual machine. And then it's going to run your provisioners, which are here, on that virtual machine. It's going to shut down the virtual machine. It's going to take a snapshot of the virtual machine and create a machine image on Azure. If you're doing this if you're multi-targeting, if I added another source and it's going to be the EC2 EBS source builder, then instead of doing all those things on Azure, it's going to create a VPC subnets. It's going to create security group. It's going to create an EC2 instance. It's going to run the provisioners on it, connect to it with SSH, shut down the thing, take a snapshot, create an EBS volume, create an AMI, and dump it into whatever region that you want it to go in. So it's a really, really cool thing. And you can see my apt-get is already running, so that my provisioners are working. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. So we'll just let that run, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to do it for Windows. So I'm going to take all the things, I'm going to drop it over here, and now I've got a Windows image, except I have to change some stuff, right? So in my Packer, in my Azure builder configuration, I need to pull a different marketplace image first and foremost, right? So I need to pull Windows, and I'm going to pull the image offer, and the publisher and the SKU are going to be different. So I'm going to override those. I'll just, VM size doesn't matter, right? I'm going to change the name to be 2016, okay? Now, another thing that differs between Windows and Linux is the communicator. So Windows uses WinRM instead, Windows remote method call or something like that. And WinRM has to be configured in order for Packer to work. So you can't use SSH. So you need a few additional parameters here in order to get WinRM to work. Okay, and once that's done, we should have an Azure virtual machine image with Windows based on 2016 Data Center Edition, which will be awesome. So just with those small changes, like I've reconfigured the builder to to build a Windows image. Now my provisioners have to change as well, right? So apt update, if I try and execute the shell command on Windows, Windows is going to be like, what the heck is apt, right? So I need to do some different things. Now the provisioner, there is another provisioner. You can go look at the provisioners that are available out here. There's Windows shell, Windows restart, there's PowerShell, there's file, which allows you to copy files to the virtual machine, etc. But I'm going to use PowerShell, okay? And with PowerShell, I'm going to just install Chocolatey, okay? So I don't need the execute command anymore because I'm on Windows and I'm running PowerShell. And then my sysprep kind of command, my clean shutdown command, is going to be different for Windows as well. And so for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to type this in myself. You're free to use this as well. This is published in Microsoft documentation. This is the sysprep command for Windows 2016. So that's it. I'm going to install Chocolatey, which is a package manager for Windows, and then I'm going to run sysprep, and I'm going to wait for this thing to quietly shut down. So now I'm going to back up. I'm going to cd into Windows. I think my debug.sh should be good. So I should be able to just run debug.sh from this folder, and it's going to pick up the working directory and the configuration of this working directory, and it's going to build my Windows VM. You can see it's already pulling the Windows Server marketplace image, which is pretty cool. Okay. So while that's in the works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start prepping, not for a zombie apocalypse, but I'm going to start prepping so that I can test my images when this bake is done. So I don't need to do any more Packer. The Packer build is in progress. What I'm going to do now is I'm going I'm going to set up a couple of modules, a couple of reusable modules. So for one, unlike previous episodes, I'm going to provision a couple of VMs. In this case, 2. A Linux one, a Windows one. Wow. But I don't want to provision a dedicated network for each one. So I want to have a network that can be shared for both of my two VMs. Novel idea, right? So I'm just going to create a folder called modules. I'm going to create a folder called network, and I'm going to create a type of network called Bastion. So this is going to be a basic Bastion network. And so, yikes. Got a little feedback. I'm not sure where that came from. So with this Terraform module, I think I'm going to steal from episode 5. Yeah, episode 5 is where I have my Bastion and my network configuration. And I'm just going to drop that stuff in there. And then I need these. I don't need the TFRs because then we can pass those values in. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, I don't think I'm going to need random because I'm going to pass in the names of the things from the root module, which I'm going to declare over here, right? So I've got variables location, network, okay. And so I'm going to remove all the references to that random. I'm going to use a variable called name that I just made up in my head right now. Doesn't exist yet, but I know that I just want to have a unique name for this thing. And somebody else, the caller of this module or the client of this module, the caller of this module is going to pass in a name that's going to be unique, and it's the responsibility of the caller of this module to make sure that name that gets passed in there is unique. Okay, so I'm going to add a name, and then I'm also going to pass in a resource group name, because I don't want to create a different resource group for all these things, right? I want my network, my VMs, they're all related. I just want them to go to the same place. So I'm going to change this. I'm not going to provision the resource group in here. So I'm going to change this to the passed in resource group that my caller is going to pass in. Okay. So I just need to update some references here for the resource group and the location. Now here I've got the virtual network is going to I'm still creating that, so that has to stay. But it looks like I just need to update the reference to the resource group. The NSG does have to have the location and a resource group. Okay, so there we go. So I got a little wiggle waggle going on with my equal sign scrimmage line. Equal sign scrimmage line. There we go. That's a thing. That is totally a thing in Terraform. You got to have an equal sign scrimmage line. Let me tell you. Otherwise, the linters go nuts. So. Okay, I feel pretty good about this. I think everything ticks and ties. I'm piping in a resource group name. I'm piping in a location and the actual name of the variables. So now I need somebody that's going to call this thing. So now this project I'm going to call the Packer tester. So this is actually going to be a root module, much like Packer repo here. So I need the basic boilerplate that I normally do. I actually want a random, so I'm going to go snag my random resource group name thing, and I'm going to call this EP9, and we're going to use the random. Okay. Now what I'm going to do from Packer tester. Okay, I don't need Packer repo. Packer repo's done. Ship it. We're good. So Packer tester, I'm going to reference my Bastion network module. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a new module. I'm going to call this my network. And I'm going to say the source of the module is at ... modules network Bastion, VS Code. Pretty rockin'. Now, I don't know if VS Code will remember all the variables for this module, but they're pretty simple. There's 3. I need a name, And the name, I'm just going to use the random string dot result. And then the resource group, which is going to be my Azure ARM resource group dot name. And then the location, which is going to be the Azure ARM resource group location. And that's it. So this is all that my module needs, all the inputs that my module needs. So this Packer tester module is basically acting as my deployment, my root module, in other words, that will be deploying the network and the VM, okay? So one other thing that I need. So I'm gonna stub out a module that's gonna create a VM, and it's gonna create a VM for Linux, and we'll call it main.tf, and we're gonna pass in the same values as this because it's gonna be in an existing resource group. Let me go to my virtual machine project. What was that, episode 4? Yeah, compute. Let me just snag compute. Okay, and let me just drop that into my Linux VM. Now, what do I not need? Okay, I don't need a public IP because I'm going to use Bastion. I don't need a subnet data source because I'm going to have to pass in a subnet. My NIC, I don't want a public NIC, so I need this to be internal. I need to drop the public thing, and instead of using the data source, I'm going to pass in a subnet ID. So this is kind of a to-do. Remember this. Okay, I'm going to use that SSH key from my key vault. So this is going to be a thing that I use. Okay. Now all this stuff. Now the random string. Remember, I'm not creating a random string. I'm passing in a name, and I am passing in a resource group as a variable. And I'm passing in a location as a variable, so I can just make these go var. Okay. Now my NIC, I'm creating my NIC. I'm getting a reference to the SSH key. That's fine. That's all fine and dandy. And my source image, that has to change for sure. So instead of using a marketplace image, I want to use a custom image. So in order to do that, I need to give it a source image ID. Now for this, I'm going to actually pass this in to make this module more reusable. It makes more sense to have the outside caller figure out what virtual machine image it wants to pass in, and then have this module just blindly use that image. So that's what we're going to do. So just by doing this little thing, and actually, you know what? To make this module simple, it probably doesn't make sense to have all these hard-coded data references either. So I'm actually going to pass in my public key as well. SSH public key. And I'm just going to cut this, and I'm going to move it out for the time being. Okay. Now, in Packer Tester, I think this is probably, because this is the root module, this is where it makes sense for me to, set up those hard-coded things, right? Because in that, we want our modules to be as reusable as possible. I don't want to have like data references and crap like that hanging around, messing up my module. So I'm just going to have my Linux VM, and I'm going to set the source to be, what is it? Oh yeah, IntelliSense. Wonderful. And again, I can go to these are all going to be the same, right? The name, the resource group, and the location. Okay. But I need a subnet ID, which is going to come from somewhere. And then I need a virtual machine image ID, which is going to come from somewhere. Okay. Now I also need my SSH public key, which is going to come from my data.azure.rm. I didn't do that right at all. Secret SSH public key dot value, right? So this thing is referencing this thing up here. right? Which we've done before. This should not be a big shocker. Okay. So now, where do I get my subnet? Well, probably from my network module, which is declared here. So the problem with that is the subnet that I've declared is embedded deep in here in this resource. Now, the way that I get it out of this module is I declare an outputs.tf, and then I declare an output called subnet ID, and I set the value to be a local reference, Azure RM subnet default.id. So this exports the subnet ID that's a resource locally created within this module as an output variable, so that other calling modules like the Packer tester module can now use that from the instance of my module, which I called network, and then now I have this output called subnet ID. So I'm declaring this module, network, it's provisioning a VNet, subnet, all the thing, a bastion, all the things. And then I'm grabbing, once that's done, I'm grabbing the subnet ID and I'm passing that to my Linux VM, and everything should be hunky-dory, okay? Now, the last thing that I need to do is I need to go grab a copy of my image. And so in Terraform, the way that I do that in Azure, I can use this Azure RM image. And there's a lot of things. Ooh, let's just jump straight to it. Now, I'm not creating a new image, I'm accessing an existing image. So I'm going to use a data reference here. So let me just copy this example, and I'm going to put this guy right here, and this is not going to be a search image, I don't know what that is. This is going to be my AZTF Linux or Ubuntu image, okay? And let's get rid of those double quotes. All right, bada bing, bada boom. Now, let's go look at my resource groups. So I've got EP9, and I should have a Packer EP9, which has 2 images in it. Beautiful. So the resource group is going to be called this. So I'm going to resource group, and then the image name, I don't have a very fancy image name. It's just called that. So I'm going to replace this with that. And now I'm going to use this data reference to define this input to my Linux VM module to say data.azure_rm_image, and then my AZTF Ubuntu image, and then I'm going to say the ID of that thing. And so now there we go, and there we go, and my Linux VM should be happy. Now, let me just check a couple of things to make sure they tick and tie. I need to have these 3 parameters here. Let's just check. Yeah, don't have them. I kind of suspected as much. So we need a subnet ID, we need a VM image ID, and what was the last one? An SSH public key. Okay, beautiful. And so VM image ID, SSH public key, and my subnet ID. Wunderbar. Okay, so this should be solid. So let me check where I am. My Windows Packer image built. Let me go up, not that far. Let me go to my Terraform, let me go to tester, and let me run Terraform init. Are my versions off? Oh yeah, that's not good. That's not good. I must have copied, yeah, I did copy pasta from the first episode, didn't I? Whoops. Let's try this again. Oh my gosh, it's so mad. Is my network the wrong version? It's all version 41. Let's just, Yeah, let's just crush my Terraform state. You know, when in doubt, just crush. What? What is this? Where am I getting 3.28 from? I'm very confused. Why do I have 3.28? I really don't think I'm using 3.28 anywhere. Finding Azure RM versions matching 3.28. So who in their right mind is using Packer repo is using 3.28. Oh, did I not delete my TF state file? PWD. Where am I? Packer tester. Yeah, there is no TF state. Packer repo should not be affecting me at all. Separate folder. I'm just getting paranoid now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh man, I have a file that's not been saved. Oh my lord. What a nut. I did not save the file. That is embarrassing. There we go. Save the file and wow, look at that. The provider changed. It's amazing. I'm like deleting Terraform state in non-working directory folders. That's how paranoid I'm getting. All right. Where are we at? Terraform. Apply. Auto approve. There we go. Ooh, we got some baddies. Let's fix these. These are module references. Yeah, we probably, in our haste, we probably forgot to update all these things. So looks like just two. Oh yeah, and we don't want that. No randos. We don't have a random string anymore. We have a name. So okay. I'm gonna run Terraform net again to pull and copy the module. Let's try that. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, so the next step that we have, once this is done, is to create the Windows VM to test our Windows resource. So we can basically create a new folder here called Windows. I'm going to copy everything in here. And okay, so while that's provisioning, we'll set up the Windows thing. Okay. So all these things stay the same, except we need to change this from an Azure RM Linux virtual machine to an Azure RM Windows virtual machine. So let's just search virtual machine. La 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 la. Come on now. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So this is the thing. That's the resource type. So under Windows, I have to change that. Now We're not going to log in with SSH. Okay, we have to log in with a password. So we're going to, different topic. We're not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to show you how to use randoms to generate a password. And I'm just going to put my password, let's make it an admin. We'll pass it in as a value, okay? And so we need a new variable. We're not going to have the SSH key anymore, so we're just going to have admin password. And yeah, so that should be good. All the other things should be the same. So I'm going to go to here. I'm going to create a VM windows.tf. I'm going now. The key vault references I'm going to move to main because they're shared. Okay, but actually they really aren't shared because we're only using it for Linux. So I'll leave it in there. I think it makes the most sense to just leave that stuff in there. So now I'm going to copy the module. It's going to be the Windows VM. I need to change the module name, otherwise we'll have an in-memory naming conflict. We're no longer using the SSH key, we're using a password. And I'm going to generate a password using the HashiCorp random provider, which we've used previously. Random. Please show me random. Random password. Wunderbar. Okay, so I'm going to generate a random password. This is insane. Just, put, a couple of those in there, okay? And, we'll just drop the double quotes because I'm OCD like that. And we'll change this to be admin password. And we'll go random password. And it is a resource now. Admin password.result. For some reason, the randoms always have the value, the output, stored as a result, which I guess, you're calculating a random something. So I guess that makes sense that it would be called a result. Maybe. Seems somewhat reasonable. Okay. Yeah, gotta make sure those files save. Good Lord. Okay. So last thing, I need to get this this password out so that I can use it when I log in. So we're also going to use local, and we're going to use a local file resource, and we're going to just drop the contents of my password into the local file, and we'll call this password.txt. Because it's really only on my local computer, so I'm not too worried about this. But what we'd probably do is we'd probably drop this into a key vault and snag the password out of key vault, but I don't really feel like doing that right now. So we're waiting for our Bastion host to provision, and once that's done, I think that's probably the long pole in the tent. It looks like the Linux virtual machine's already there. We're just waiting on the Bastion host, which those can take a few minutes. So while that's cooking, I'm going to go get some tea. Still recording. Okay, it looks like it's done. While I go log in with Linux, let's try and get the Windows machine to provision. Because what we should have right now is the Linux machine, the Bastion host, and the network's all out there. We just added the Windows and the password file. So we'll get that rolling and we'll go log into our Linux VM using Bastion to show that working. And then when that's done, we should be able to RDP into the Windows machine from there. So let's go look. So let's hit refresh. So here's our resource group, and you can see we've got our virtual network, we got our Bastion host, we got a virtual machine in here. And I'm going to connect over the Bastion. And I think the username was admin user. And again, I'm going to use the SSH key from Key Vault, which is our friend here. And it's my bad. Private key. Let's see, pop-up blocker kills this demo. Not today. Okay, so here we are, Houston, host name. So here we are in our Linux VM that we built with Packer. And if I run sudo apt update, should not have, it's just gonna do stuff, but there probably shouldn't be anything since we just ran apt update. All right, so let's check on, what happened here? I didn't give the Windows machine a sufficiently different name. So it's trying to create a nick. The name I need to give it, so I need to add like win or something to the front of this to give it like a unique name. I forgot about that. So let's run a net. And let's reapply. Because if you look, the name that we passed in is just the random string from the resource group. And we already have a VM, a disk, a pip. Wait, why do we have a pip? Oh, the pip is used for the Bastion. Yeah, not for the VM. We have a disk, we have a pip, we have a disk, we have a VM, and we have a NIC. But these three are all related to the Linux machine. The Windows machine can't use those same names for the NIC and the disk within the same resource group. We have to use something different. So I'm going to provision something. I've added the win in front of it, which will make it different. So That should be good. So we'll wait for this to provision. Oh no, what happened here? Probably something with my virtual machine client VM win. I'm still using the Ubuntu image ID. Whoa, gosh, man, I'm making all kinds of mistakes. Sorry about that. So we need to have a new data reference to the Windows Win 2016 image. I think I just named that Win 2016, and that should be good. I don't think I need an init to re-init that, and we'll just look at that Packer, AZTF Windows 2016. So that should be good. So it detected that image was a Linux image, and we can't use a Linux image with a Windows VM, which makes sense in a weird kind of way, but it makes sense. It's not weird at all, actually. No, it's not. All right. I think we have a winner this time. No. What do we do here? Let's check our Windows. So what is the problem with? The problem is with this Windows OS disk. Oh my gosh. Wow. Just the foolishness. So I added the reference, but I did not link the reference to my module input. Oops. Really got to be more careful. It's all got to tick and tie. It's all got to pipe together. Piping these values from one object to another object to another object can be a very tedious thing, and you just have to be careful and pay attention to what you're doing, and clearly I was not paying attention to what I was doing there. I think this is a winner. Third time the charm? Let's go. Let's go. That's a win. It's creating. It would have aired by now. I'm excited. Are you excited? We're going to have a Windows VM here. You don't see those very often these days. All right, let's go peek at our resource group. Bada bing, bada boom. So I got my Win VM, my Win disk, and my Win NIC. That's a lot of winning, let me tell you. Ba-dum-bum. Here's my awesome password. Okay, we should be done. Wunderbar. Let me go snag my password and let me try and connect to this Windows VM. So I'm going to go connect, Bastion. We're going to go admin, user, password. I know the password. Paste. And we are in. Admin user. Good old admin user. Personalized settings, those are important. There you go. So that's it. So that's it for this episode. I showed how we got 2 Packer images off the ground, a Linux one and a Windows one. I showed how we created a Packer repository, which is just a resource group. Very simple, basic repository where we can drop Azure virtual machine images. I showed how we could create a couple of modules that will help us provision very simple network, very simple virtual machine instances where we can test out our virtual machines, both Linux and Windows. And I connected using SSH and using RDP over my Bastion host. So I hope you really liked this episode. If you did, give me a like and please subscribe. Make sure you turn on those notifications so you know when my next video drops. And please let me know if there's something you'd like me to dig into and go in more detail about. I'd love your feedback, and I'd love to see some comments about what you're working on and what you might need some help with. So again, until next time on Azure Terraformer, this is Azure Terraformer signing off. Thanks again. Bye.